You're now tuned in to the original podcast of A Stronger Foundation. Welcome. Some call me Doctor, others call me Master T. You can call me anytime. I'm Sweet T, the academic architect PDO. That's planner, designer, and overseer of the academic success plan for kids. So tell your neighbor or call somebody and let them know it's that time. Hey y'all, let's get building. Hey team, welcome aboard. This podcast is titled The Tutortoolate Syndrome. So this podcast title refers to the common practice of parents to reach out and to seek academic help for their children at a time in their academic journey when it may be too late. The best way to align a child with their ideal purpose is to invest in their academic development before they begin to show signs of weakness. A decision to wait to see if the child will develop academic weaknesses is unwise because in most cases, the cost to realign the child later is greater than a parent is either able or willing to invest. Where this leaves a child is heart-wrenching for me because failure to be proactive may prevent this child from reaching their highest potential to fulfill their ideal life purpose. It's so unfortunate how many parents, although they see the flashing headlights steadily approaching in the distance, they still hesitate to take action until the sirens begin to blast in the back of their minds. A decision to act while the danger is at bay appears to be the uncommon alternative for many parents who intentionally neglect the academic warnings from their child's teacher in hope they will simply vanish on their own. They refuse to take action at a time when doing so would produce the best academic experience for the child. And then when the child's weaknesses begin to escalate to the point where they can no longer be ignored, parents decide to respond by seeking easy fixes. I have come to terms that easy and free is not always the best and highest quality. In addition, I embrace the concept that you get what you pay for. So, at the stage of desperation, when most parents decide to finally take corrective action to amend their child's broken education, they sometimes expect to receive the highest corrective quality for free. Many of the best tutors may charge over $50 an hour. And at this price, most parents may then agree to hire a tutor for 2 hours per week. But they soon realize that 2 hours per week is barely sufficient in terms of the time required to close their child's learning gaps. Hence, a financial burden has been established that never had to occur if preventative methods had been implemented before it was too late. The sad part is that oftentimes, even with multiple hours of isolated tutoring, the child is still at a great loss. In financial terms, parents should understand it's going to cost more to redirect a learner after a certain stage. First of all, it took the child years to generate the learning gaps. How then would one expect gaps to be closed within a period of weeks? So let me quote myself from a previous episode. Pre-existing conditions in education are the existence of previous learning gaps that has compounded over multiple years. The more gaps a child has is the more at risk they are for becoming victims at the drop-off zone. Secondly, compounding gaps means gaps on top of gaps. And depending on how deep the gaps are, a tutor will have to work that much harder. And so, hear me. The longer it takes for corrective action to be implemented, is the more expensive the gaps will be, and more extensive the gaps will be. Hence, the financial burden for corrective measures will also be greater. From my personal observation, the average parent in this situation are forced to compromise on the degree of the help that is required to sufficiently close the learning gaps due to lack of financial ability on their part. Now, therefore, they make one of two choices. Either continue to neglect the academic emergency, which means no tutoring, or appease their guilt by partially tending to the need through an insufficient amount of tutoring. Partially tending to the need is only effective in preventing failure overall, but not adequate support for getting the child back on track or for realigning with their ideal future self. Reaching out for help from a tutor after a certain stage is what I call the Tutortoolate syndrome. I have trouble thinking of anything more heartbreaking than this. I mean, literally setting a child up for failure by neglecting to initiate preventative measures, and especially at a time when it would have been affordable. Now, I always go back to the fact that it is unethical and unfair to a child to have to walk an alternative path that is less rewarding than the path that would align to them with that would have aligned them to their greatness that they were created to uncover. Let me say that again. I always go back to the fact that it is unethical and unfair to a child to have to walk an alternative path that is less rewarding than the path that would align them with the greatness that they were created to uncover. Consider this. If we don't hesitate to protect our children from unforeseeable dangers like hurricanes and diseases, why do we hesitate to provide equally ethical protection for educational disaster? In preparation of approaching storms, we secure our children's room windows. In preparation for possible childhood diseases, we immunize our kids even though they cry from fear of the needle. We do it anyways because we know from experience that the temporary pain caused by that needle is insignificant when compared to a possible detriment caused by a disease. However, in preparation for possible academic catastrophes, which more than average amount of learners do experience, no preventative protective measures are taken. Come on, sweet tea. The examples of the hurricane and disease are both life-threatening scenarios, but education, it's not that serious. Not that serious? Not life-threatening? Well, Well, guess what? In my opinion, a child being forced to live an alternative life simply because they were not adequately prepared to fulfill the requirements of their highest potential is life threatening. Because essentially, their ideal life that they were intended to live is lost. Now, let me make it clear. I am not an advocate for isolated tutoring that fail to provide sufficient redirection and accountability. The consequences of the tutortoolate syndrome are financially burdensome. But if a parent makes the choice to wait until it's too late, they should be willing to accept this consequence as opposed to punishing the child again. After all, the problem exists only because it was allowed to be generated in the first place and then allowed to further be developed through neglect. Remember, although the child may be the dominant academic dictator, the ultimate driver for development of a strong versus weak academic foundation is the parent because they have the power to make decisions for the child. Even with a child who fits the profile of an academic dictator, the parent ultimately has the final say. It may require the parent to engage in tough love and endure certain resistance and pushback, but the ultimate choice is theirs. The tutortoolate syndrome, implementing tutoring too late, will certainly suffice as a crutch throughout secondary education, but it will not reverse the child's academic paralysis. Understand that it's understood that most parents, now unless they are teachers themselves, they do not know how to manage your child's education. And that is perfectly fine. But do not accept that as an excuse for taking a stance of ignorance regarding this very, very vital matter. A childhood education has a pivotal role in any adult's fate, as their entire future will rotate around the quality of the educational foundation that they developed as a child. Now, I am not oblivious to the fact that they're just kids. And I agree 100% that kids should be kids. However, I am adamant in my belief that childhood is a time of building the foundation upon which the future will stand. If they don't build during childhood, then they have to build as adults, like many adults in the lower to middle classes of society had to do. The big deal is that doing it that way, postponing preparation for adulthood until adulthood, keeps the pattern of poverty and hinders anyone from reaching their highest potential. This is the method that keeps people trapped in their cycles of underachieving. Of all the things that can be passed down to a child, it's a sad ordeal when the survival blueprint they receive reveals the same failed pattern and cycle that resulted in one shortcoming after the other for the previous generation. Now, I understand that as a people, we have been mentally trained to be satisfied with the minor things in life We have been glazed over with ideas which allow us to be contented with mediocrity. We have come to accept that the amazing things and places around the world that we have read about are true simply because we have seen them in pictures, in books, in magazines. We accept that we may never walk across that amazing glass bridge located in China because it costs too much to travel there. We are at peace with knowing that our children may never get the opportunity to witness defiance of gravity by visiting the Hoover Dam because that's for smart, rich people. We accept that, like us, our kids will learn the minimum in school and become the bricks of society who will labor and report to the brains. That's the way it's always been. Our parents never traveled to the greatest sites in the world because that luxury has always been reserved for the brains. So, the most common way that I've known our people to deal with this loss of opportunity, is to vent their displeasure about how they do all the work on their jobs and the brain gets the reward. I've also heard lots of talk of injustice, which leads me to ponder, are my people prevented from traveling to any place allowable in the world to witness various phenomena we've only read about? Are my people restricted from acquiring the highest education or from attending certain schools that are notorious for producing brains? Are learning resources intentionally kept from our children in schools in any way, which limits their access to equal opportunities for becoming brains? Not to my knowledge. So, as I stated in a previous episode, justice is for the taking. It's not hidden, although it may be disguised. Justice is plentiful within opportunities for learning. And since hidden the books can be quite tedious and somewhat unattractive and distasteful for a lethargic learner, parents must be vigilant about taking preventative steps to avoid the need to resort to Tutortoolate syndrome. In closing, the Tutortoolate syndrome causes parents to act too late. They begin to try and reverse years of academic neglect through a few sessions with a tutor. Visualize this with me. Imagine the scenario of pouring liquid through a funnel so quickly that the pressure causes the liquid to settle high within the funnel, producing the false hope that the container is full and may even possibly overflow. When in fact, as soon as pouring is stopped, the liquid then settles to reveal that the container is still not full. This is what it's like to provide quick fix tutoring to a child. To add validation to this analogy, if the container has holes, as would be presented by tutoring a child with extensive learning gaps, the container may never be full. So remember that the whole point to this is to show love and kindness to our children by giving them the best gift in life. Not just an average education, but a solid academic foundation. Let's team up and join forces to set them up for success. Let's help them to take the justice that has been assigned to them. It's in the American pledge, liberty and justice for all. Come on, y'all. Let's do this. Parents, I hear you. Sweetie, it's easier said than done. But that's why I am here. Because I acknowledge that it takes a team. As far as kids and their learning is concerned, I am always ready to fight on their behalf. So let's do this together. Bring it in on 3. We're going to say teamwork. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Teamwork! Thanks for listening.